Welcome to the cryptozoology show. This episode, we're going to have everything from killer scorpions, giant great whites, his bigger cousin. We're going to discuss Carchardon, Megladon, thought to be extinct. We're going to discuss all kinds of giant man-eating fish to Slavic lake monsters, some fascinating sea carcasses, and all kinds of stuff. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge of different lake to sea monsters and all kinds of things. So it's a scary world out there, from giant man-eating sharks to killer crayfish scorpion monsters that are out to attack the poor our buddies the seals, to terrifying creatures like these ones here. Everything from three-headed medusas making fortunes with terror tactics about the masks and the temporary full powers and things like that. Just like the temporary full powers of in the Second World War when they introduced the tax, the sort of different income tax and sort of things like that. They said it was a temporary measure. It was a temporary long time ago, sort of thing. From ones like that to the Lochness monster and mysterious pot smoking and poutine smoking PMs, as you can see here. There's a lot of sea monsters definitely out there of all kinds. So we certainly have some interesting ones this show and all kinds of things. And there's a lot of crazy stuff. We'll probably cover a new show there. There's a lot of new things the bizarre governments have done recent times that your freedoms are being taken away from you and you don't even seem to realize it. And this temporary measure stuff is all BS. These guys want this stuff to keep going for a long time to come and to have complete control over its citizens, its little minions, right? Just like they do here of the poor Lochness monster. I like the Lochness monster. I think he hasn't hurt anybody and hasn't done anything mean yet. He just jumps in the river and swims around and smokes big crackers, just like his leader does. And this three-headed medusas and these different ones, right? So, I mean, it's not his fault. It's the man. It's the system, right? It's Big Brother. So, but anyways, some of the sea carcass of this episode, it's all really good stuff in here. But we discuss this interesting carcass that was found in 1990. That is skeptics claim is a whale's wazooga and different things. So there's some sort of adult like talk about different anatomy and things like that. So for the sensitive spinsters, whatever, all this sort of thing, the young, whatever. Viewer discretion is advised, right? So, but anyways, so let's get on with this. Giglio's whale, Gigliolio. Hey, that'd be a new sort of one there for the Alpha Getty guys there. Gigliolios, little whales and sort of things like that. They probably are. I think they have a fish one, so they probably have something similar to it. I doubt they know the difference between a fish and a mammal. So I would doubt if they do have a whale in it already. But anyways, poor Gigliolio's whale was described by Gigliolio back in the 1800s, and never been one seen since, except there's some very strange things about it. It was a two-fin sort of whale, right? So he's got the two going up here. And a very interesting sort of whale, and there's been recent whales found and things like that. So this is not non-feasible at all, sort of thing, right? And this guy was sort of meticulous about it. I fully believe it. And not only that, I found a lot of sort of older sort of maps of weird animals where they got all kinds of things on them and different things like that. And I have seen a few examples over the ages there of two whole whales and two fin whales like this. So this creature might have been more common in sort of the earliest times, right? And maybe was some kind of whale that was closer to sort of like the early whalers and things like that, so they might have got them off first, right? So sort of thing where they slim them out faster than some of the other species. I would suspect something like that. Like when somebody takes all this time to describe all that and all these kinds of things, it's hard for me to believe that it's sort of like this person was, you know, sounded like the whole sort of thing of it sounds to me pretty legitimate, so I have no problem with it. And there has been a few weird sort of mentions of odd whales that people saw in the past that might have been a two-fin whale and things like that, so I wouldn't be 100% surprised if this thing was still out there. I hope he is. The poor guy is certainly an unusual, different one. And poor guy now, all these, if he was a krill eater or plankton or whatever he was eating, you know, and now he's got to suck up whole poutine containers all day, and garbage and pop bottles and all that kinds of stuff, right? So, you know, we got to stop doing stuff like that, or poor old Gigliolio's whale here is going to be no more if he still does exist, right? But fascinating sort of early cryptid, and certainly an interesting one. And but the sightings sort of like I've compiled all kinds of 5 million stuff where people say the creature looked like a whale and it had 2 fins or 3 fins on the top, but you don't really know if that's Gigliolio's whale here or not, right? Like, there's these other sightings that some of them could have been mixed in with that sort of thing. So I'd give it at least a high probability that it certainly probably did exist at one point, sort of thing. So whether it still does, that's another sort of thing. Certainly, if you've ever had a sighting of a 2-fin whale like that, that would be certainly interesting to know. Or if you've ever heard any accounts, definitely contact. Next year, Lake Baleka, Serbia, giant catfish reports. One bizarre account, a diver seeing a giant catfish at least 300 pounds and 12 feet long. Other divers have claimed similar. A lake used to be a river, and catfish have been caught about half that size in it. So there's some real monsters in there. Lake Caballo, Switzerland. Giant catfish witnessed by diver 15 feet long, and older records of one caught that was near 9 feet long. 2 other lakes near it also have rumors of huge catfish in it. Nukatal Lake and Lake Merton. So there you have it. And as I showed you in the previous episode, the mean old Helgian monster there attacked poor Bambi up on the sort of stuff. So yeah, you know, and like I said, I mentioned in some of these that, I mean, because they can reach like such astounding, there's definitely like commercial records like 15 feet long, but there's other records of 16, 18, and 20 a few that I've seen that are really sort of likely credible, sort of thing like that. So my personal belief is they probably, at least at one time, might have gotten 20 feet, but I know for sure at least that I would consider extremely reliable up to about 16 feet and 800 pounds. So that's one heck of a giant monster, and certainly big enough to swallow a human, right? And George just himself had probably about 5-6 stories that I think I had jotted down of different people being attacked in the Danube, and some other sort of river he mentioned. What was it again? The Tria. I don't know. I have it somewhere written down. And some one I'm not familiar with it, but he was telling me about another one that was pretty interesting too, that I had jotted down about. There was some real the Dina, Dina. Yeah, that might be it. Something like that. Anyway, I'll give you an update. I'll find the information. But just there's all kinds of these worldwide, so I find these interesting because these catfish are way bigger than what you know what I mean. They're claiming they can get, sort of idea, and it shows the fascinating sort of things about them where these people, a lot of people have always blamed it on waves and things like that, but in a lot of these accounts and some of these lakes, there really is Titanic-sized sort of catfish out there that could fit the tale of what they're saying and would explain the odd mysterious person disappearing in the lake or pond, swimming away, and this kinds of stuff, right? So it's just an interesting phenomenon, but there certainly is some real monster ones out there. Now, in a previous show there, I'd mentioned a little bit about this, but this is a very little known cryptid, but there actually could be an unknown giant species of some kind of relative of a whale shark or possibly a whale shark that really are off course. One way or the other, there's some interesting sort of accounts here. I had mentioned one that was found, a really old early account. I think it was like early 1900s, and they had found at this dam. The water got lowered, and there was this giant 20-foot some monster sort of toothless shark that they'd captured, and he was spotted. And so similar to like a whale shark, right? But there's a few other sort of interesting accounts. There was one of a lady in 1970 in a fish market in Brazil who saw what looked to her like a whale shark, but of about a smaller size, about 5 feet long, with spots. But she said that they weren't exactly all round and seemed to be toothless as well. And she thought maybe it was some kind of weird catfish, but she couldn't see any whiskers of any sort. And it much more looked more to her like a small whale shark would, right? Except that the blotches were different. So here's the description here. As you can see, sort of extremely the same as a whale shark, exactly the same kind of fin structure and all kinds of stuff to it, except that the blotches were sort of not perfectly round and stuff. So there could have been a few things. She might have actually seen these sort of like maybe flies were eating around it, or maybe it got scraped on the ground and some of the spots were like, who knows, like that sort of thing, like something possibly like that. But there's that one. There was another account in the Orinoco River somewhere where this other sort of lady, she had went up in this other sort of area these people were buying in this market, and they saw one there that was like about 8 feet long. But they just mentioned that it was sort of, they wondered if it was some kind of strange catfish, but they didn't find any whiskers. But this thing was about 8 feet long, but they said that it looked like it was toothless, right? And its mouth was open, a big jaw sort of thing like that. But they said it looked very much like sort of a whale shark, and they said that it had spots on it. But they didn't say any irregularity or not. So this is a problem. And there's also, there was a record of one in the Mekong River of supposedly some kind of what they claim was some kind of catfish, right? But it looks extremely like a whale shark in the sort of photo of it. And there's another one that was supposed to be in the Yangtze, and it was very small up on this bank, and you see this blotted sort of stuff like that. And there's a few mentions in bizarre accounts here and there, that probably 2 or 3 others I can sort of think of in my mind that I've seen across in markets in sort of the Amazon region and in Chinese markets of people claiming that they saw a sort of like larger sort of blackfish here with sort of spots on it of some sort, right? So this is interesting. I mean, it could be a few things. Either A, because I've recorded basking sharks and whale sharks going way up rivers in North America, but the first account was extremely far up the Amazon, and the Orinoco, that one too was quite sort of inland away from the ocean, right? So if it was whale sharks, they had to really went a long way out of their way here. And obviously they can survive in fresh water for a massive length of time because there's no way the creature could have made it up that far, right? So this is what I'm saying. There's a lot of BS in this thing of the claims that sharks can. I think this was made up in early times because they sort of, a few examples they chucked in from freshwater or saltwater right away. No sort of testing in between to give it time to acclimate and all kinds of stuff. And even at that, maybe you're stressing the creature out and they don't want to do it. But whatever the case, I suspect that because of early deaths and things like that, and people worried great whites were swimming in all the rivers, all this kind of stuff, to sort of kibosh this sort of stuff, they keyed it down to sort of now they can just deal with bull sharks and have to blame it always on that no matter what. And to make sure that people aren't over massively panicked, you just sort of, deny anything else that's out there, right? Sort of idea. And that's one of the reasons I suspect. And the other reasons is simply that the thing is these things are sort of random, right? They don't do it in 5 million seemingly of them, right? So that's the thing is that it's just here or there. But the point is that for sure they can survive in fresh water much longer than what they claim. I've collected over 80-some species, and this could be another sort of thing. But the second lady's account there sort of really interests me because she asked them where they caught it, and they said that they caught it in the river. And the same thing, these markets are like, they couldn't have gotten fresh fish from the ocean somewhere. These are peasants selling it sort of like right from the sort of river, right? So somehow they caught these, and they're rarely caught because there's probably some kind of plankton feeder of some sort or whatever, right? So even if they aren't sort of a whale shark and a freshwater version relative, they still may behave similar. There was some early accounts where the natives thought that this shark, toothless shark, had actually killed some natives and ate them. But I mean, they just might have blamed it on that and seen one around at the time or something, right? And maybe it was something else that ate them, right? So who knows? But anyways, it's an interesting cryptid there where possibly either whale sharks are going up sort of rivers even much farther than we think they can, or B, that, you know what I mean, there's some relative out there that's close of a freshwater version, and possibly there was another account like that similar in Australia once, in a sort of a river of a spotted whitish sort of big, large, shadowy sort of thing that might fit a whale shark-like sort of thing. So that's another one there. So you actually have Australia, 2 areas in China, but the main one in the Amazon River in South America, with all a similar described sort of a giant, plankton sort of shark of some sort, with spots on them of some sort. And since none of the other ones really sort of state that they were perfectly round, the sort of spots or anything like that, any of these other ones could have been like the lady finding it in the sort of market. It could have been the same thing where they just said it got spots on it, but maybe they were blotchy, right? So, but anyways, a very interesting cryptid, certainly, but that's what it looked like, and they could be still being seen. If you're a person that lives in that sort of Amazon region, always look in the fish markets. If you see something like this, please contact me. I would just absolutely love to sort of find out whether or not it's possible that there's an unknown giant sort of, a relative of a whale shark that lives in fresh water. That would be fantastic. Certainly would be a great cryptid discovery for sure, right? So, but already ones were caught and described in the past, right? And there's a few accounts and things like that. But I mean, for somebody to give it the official A-OK, it would be fascinating. So either that or certainly, again, disproves this theory that the shark couldn't last for any length of time in fresh water. one way or the other, very, very interesting, because some of these accounts are like massive, like it would take the creature massive ages to make it that far, right? So obviously they can't be sort of in the trouble that they claim, right? So in the previous show there, I mentioned a little bit about these sort of ones, but we were lacking a sort of one. Just mention a few other things about this serang from over in India, and we're actually fixing that show because there were some other things we wanted to add to it, and so it may be not a good idea with this serang here. They could get reported up to at least about 8 feet, although there's some stories even bigger, and at least proven, though, to 6 feet and about 120 pounds. And they also occur in Malaysia, and there's been attacks reported there by them. So it's not a good idea to be swimming in these rivers under any circumstances. That's another big catfish out there that you can certainly hunt that would be definitely worth a scrap. Nice size monster there. And we'll show you after here that, I mean, the claims that they say of how big a species can get, for everything from sturgeon, all kinds of things, is quite often in the books are way on the conservative side. Like, quite often they're not even listing half as big as they can actually get, right? So, very, very interesting. But next here's a fantastic sort of tale from George. I collected dozens of magnificent sort of tales from old George, and here's one about a fascinating creature called the Bukovich. Although considered by most as a mythological creature, thanks to old George told this interesting account of a man went fishing in a canoe. He kept saying, like, canoe, like boat or canoe. So again, whether it really was a canoe or some kind of small boat, sometimes this guy, he would sort of never really answer the question. Right? But anyways, somewhere it was supposed to be a cooler day, and it was in the sort of fall sometime or something, and on this place called Silver Lake in 1930s in Serbia. And the fellow was out in it, and he heard this loud roaring howl like wolves. He then looked across, and he saw up in the distance this large creature on the shore that had horns and seemingly 6 legs that looked like an alligator with scales of black. These big, big black scales, and he could see them sort of shining and glistening sort of on the thing, right? So the guy got in panic and terror, and he paddled back and told his story to a few, including old George and some other. Old George used to like to sort of, he had relatives all through Serbia and Croatia and Poland and all kinds of stuff. And this guy, when as a young man, would travel around and do a lot of weird odd jobs and visit different relatives and all this. So he loved collecting these sorts of wacky sort of stories, right? Sort of thing. But this is where it gets interesting. Not long later, some persons, like, I kept trying to get, like, not much later, I don't know, like, it was a while, right? So, again, whatever a while was, it could have been like months, maybe a year, like whatever, a few weeks, sometime later, right, sort of thing, okay. They found the guy's sort of canoe, right, sort of abandoned, and it had a big sort of, it looked like as if a shark or something had bitten into it. It was all damaged and crunched on the side, and the guy was never found. So did a real Bukovich get him? Okay, and this is what this thing looked like. So this is what this guy's seen, right? So let's say that this creature actually did this. This might have been like the attack. He came up here, he bit the side of the sort of boat and dragged, poor Jimbo or whatever, right, into the drink, right? So, but I mean, absolutely. So, but here's the things is, okay, George told me that apparently these creatures live in all, like in these sort of, in the Danube and sort of in these different ponds and rivers around there. It's like the monster, he can walk on land too. So, like, I guess basically this thing just goes around where he wants and visits different bodies of water, right? Sort of thing like that. and he told me lots about people being eaten by catfish there, like quite a few stories. But one of them was terrifying that I mentioned another story. But the thing is that, let's say there was some sort of reality to this. I mean, there could have been some things. It might have had nothing to do with this sort of monster, where this other guy, where the guy's canoe went out. Maybe the guy was catfishing or something like that and tried to haul in one of these big ones. And back then they had anchors, a lot of them with the points and stuff like that. Maybe somehow the creature, as they're trying to get him in, started swatting, flashing and whatever, and grabbed him and sort of ate the guy, who knows, right? Sort of idea. And that's quite feasible, because others, where they knew for sure, they know it was a catfish that grabbed them, right? But in this case, let's say that whatever, right? Like something like that. So now the anchor bashes into the side of the sort of canoe and made this crunch-like sort of stuff. It's feasible. But he said that these things had some kind of like ridge on their back and some kind of weird fin in the center, and it's got these two funny horns that are crooked like a little bit, and he's got 6 legs. And the guy seen it like right up on the shore, exactly like this, and the creature's tail was up, and he said it was sort of like fish-like, right? Like, you know, like a whale fishy-like. So that's basically what sort of this guy had seen, right? So my wonderment is what if it's some kind of strange lizard of some sort, or some kind of weird thing, right? Where maybe it doesn't actually have 6 legs, it actually has 4, and these back things are some kind of like flippers possibly of some sort, where it's not actually even its legs, right? That could be like some kind of appendage, because if you notice where that area is, right, where the guy's saying like the 3rd set of legs are, it's very near sort of like, it would be maybe just behind sort of the sort of anal area and all that sort of stuff, right? Like it could be that this is some kind of weird appendage that comes out of it, right? Like your butt almost, or whatever, right? Like, who knows? Like some kind of weird sort of thing like that, right? So I'm just saying that it's weird. There's these strange accounts, right? And I mean, these people are petrified in these places, right, of some of these things, right? So, I mean, he fully believed 100% that this creature exists, right? So, oh, yeah, he's there. He's big. He's got the long, he looks like a dragon crocodile, you know. Right? So, like, I mean, this is interesting. Like, I mean, that these, and I mean, they actually really fully believe this sort of stuff. So I don't, even though the 6 legs sounds a bit out there, and the double horns and everything, I still, I could see is creatures with all these things. They got horns. Some of them got, you know, more than 4 legs. Enemies got 5. So, I mean, it's still feasible in the realm of the world, right? So, and especially if this creature is sort of rare, and maybe they hole up in the day and, like, I don't know, caverns or whatever, right? And they come out at night and they do this sort of stuff. So then they're rarely seen, right? But, I mean, it's a fascinating tale. So, anyways, beware if you're in those rivers over in Serbia and Croatia and all around that sort of stuff. I already showed you the giant eel monster from Serbia, one of the best lake monster films on earth, bar none. Right in the top, like 5 of all times, right? Sort of thing like that. And you know, so that area of the country certainly has some credible sort of monsters going on. And so, and I mean, these people are quite serious sort of stuff. They really believe these things, right? So that's another interesting thing. So just, George was the greatest plethora of stories, everything from the explanation of the origin of Sasquatch, which is the greatest explanation on earth. I call it George's theory, and sort of have it right there exactly as he said, because I sort of I challenge any skeptic to prove him wrong. So I mean, he may actually have the origin of the real Sasquatch, what's going on out there. And I mean, the funniest explanation of anything I've ever heard of sort of why something is, right? Because I've heard some fascinating accounts from different people and different cultures, and some of their beliefs of sort of, you know, like, I told you my lady friend there from the Philippines that saw the giant lady monster vampire woman that tried to eat her children, eat the children or sort of stuff that she was with, and all these kinds of things. And I mean, the her belief was that she really is some kind of like vampire like sort of thing, right? But I mean, I believe fully that it's an unknown titanic species of bat that would eat small rodents and things like that, and a 2 to 4 year old child, sort of when you're a titanic 10 to 15 foot sort of bat monster, would be an appropriate sort of food source, right? So, it's terrifying and gross, but I mean, this is what I'm saying. Their reality, she really did see that. I know I saw a whole family, a bunch of kids came in, and I didn't ask them to do this. This had nothing to do with anything. They were just coming in. They come in day and night to visit her. She has over 100 of them come in day and night. I mean, I never seen anything like it in my entire life, but they're used to this stuff, these gang, right? And and they're really tight-knit family sort of stuff here. Ultimately, they're like the Waltons on crack, sort of, right? You know what I mean? Like, sort of thing, right? Like this. And then I was talking about this, and then she said the word. I said, "What's this again?" And all of their faces was in terror, because some of them were there that were still young at the time when they had seen it. That they were, you know what I mean, looking out of this sort of window and all saw this bat monster. And I mean, all of them see this thing. There is no way these people lied. I would bet $1 trillion on this, okay? So, like, I mean, that's how convinced, when I saw all their faces, the utter fear of death. Like, I mean, they were petrified, right? So this is, like, so convincing. So there's no way that they didn't see some titanic, bizarre creature out there in front of their sort of apartment complex, right? So, and the same with the old George. Sometimes some of the things he mentioned was extremely convincing, even though they were insane. They're convincing, right? So I'm just not as skeptical as some, because I've seen a lot of strange things over the years and ran across a lot of sort of interesting sort of phenomena and things like that that certainly would make you wonder that there sure is some mysterious, strange things out there, right? And that but sadly, with our pollutants and all the things that we're throwing in, it may not be mysterious much more. The big mystery will be is what kind of garbage we can collect today, right? Because we won't know. There'll be a 10 zillion trillion sorts of them. There'll be more species of garbage than sort of creatures, right? So there you go. So how's that for a sort of a prophetic thought, right? I mean, so can you imagine in the future, science will be describing more species of different types of garbage that are in our waters than what life is, right? So that could be our sort of future. So think about that, and please keep our waters cleaner. The poor old Bukovic monster, he's not going to be out there and sort of, you know, there's not too many six-legged monsters around. So, I mean, he's certainly on the rare one there, so we should try and protect the poor beast. But absolutely interesting anyway. So still to this date, whether the guy really had a small boat or a canoe, you know, we'll leave that on the fence, and sort of thing like that. But certainly whatever this thing was, it was certainly scary looking anyway. Interesting cryptid anyway. Here, this one, strange spotted beak whale, cryptid, Florida Keys, 1977. I had in one, what was about 12, 13 days there, yeah. So in less than a 2-week period, I had 2 strange sightings in 2 bodies of water. So better luck that I've ever had in my entire life in a one sort of shot, like sort of so quick like that, except seeing in the same day with other witnesses several times the same animal. That's different, but this is like where two separate sorts of things in two sort of bodies of water not far from each other were two very bizarre sort of things that I saw. And I was talking to this diver that I seen came out. The guy sort of scared me. I seen these stuff coming along, and I said, "What's that?" It is. As he started to get closer, I said, "Oh, it's a diver." And the guy was snorkeling around. He was doing early treasure hunting and stuff like that. And I said, "Be careful out there." I said, when I was there the other day, because I was bone fishing and stuff, and I was doing these experiments on these early crappie jigs for bonefish, and I was catching them, right? And I caught even small tarpon and sort of snook with them in another place in sort of South Carolina, and a few other sort of things like that as I was experimenting with these. And the guy's laughing. He said, "But I'll tell you," he said something. He said, "I saw something in the bay beside," and he showed me there's these different lagoons all along the Florida Keys. So it was the next one over from where we were, and sort of thing like this. And this is what this guy saw. This thing was like 30 feet long, okay? The creature approached him from behind, and he almost had an accident in his pants when he turned around and saw this beaked serpent-looking whale with white glowing like dots that looked like a whale shark. Sharp teeth and hair like a mane on top of its head. The teeth were terrifying looking, at least about 4 inches long. The creature stared at him and then turned and went away into deeper water. He then saw bubbles come out of his head area. So this occurred in the Key Largo sort of area, but he concluded in his mind that probably it was some kind of whale after all, right? But at first he wasn't sure exactly. It kind of reminded him of a whale, and he said it looked extremely whale-like, same sort of, and this is the thing. But the blotches, he said that it had these spots, but they were sort of like, some of this got cut out. I don't know what is always wrong with this program. It always does this. But the spacings, like some of the dots were smaller and then some were bigger sort of, but they were glowing like a phosphorescent sort of thing, right? And I mean, this guy's face, he was quite nervous from it, stuff like that, but he said that the creature was staring at him with some kind of like intelligence, like as if it was sort of analyzing and saying, should I attack or not, sort of idea, and then just went away, right? So, I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, it sounds very more like it really was some kind of primitive whale. So this actual whale may have some kind of growth that comes out of it, is something like he thought it looked like some sort of hair-like substance, right? But whatever it was, I mean, the creature was in perfect health. It wasn't dying. It was sort of it, and it had sort of like this. It looked intelligent, right? So I mean, most fascinating one I've ever collected was sort of. I've gotten all kinds, like so many divers that I interviewed, from seeing giant catfish to muskies over 7 feet long, and all kinds of different ones, and a bizarre one in Lake Champlain, finding some kind of seemingly a sea monster might have went through the marsh, and all kinds of weird stuff, but different ones that I mentioned in the book and different things. But this is the most interesting sort of one like that. I've seen other glowing cryptids and sea monsters that were reported over the centuries, but none ever exactly like this one. So lots of them with hair, some of them whale-like, some of them different things, but with this phosphorescent whale and the hairdo going on and everything, and the size of it and all the other stuff, it's certainly a more a unique sort of cryptid, right? So I really like that one, and I find that one sort of very interesting. So I was so happy to meet this guy, because I mean, it was just lucky, and me making a joke that sort of I ended up lucky to get this story, right? But I mean, I jotted it down at a time, and I was completely enthralled by this. So what did he really see, right? Like, so I mean, really bizarre, but I mean, right in the same sort of area where he was, except a bay over, I saw something really bizarre that I still have no explanation for. I cover it fully in the book. That was really weird. And also then on the St. John's River, where they hold those giant bass tournaments and stuff like that, I also saw something very peculiar. So this was all within a short sort of period like that. So I had an extremely lucky sort of a time up there in a very short period period of time. Mine, he almost sort of had some wild, insane run-ins, almost got killed, so it wasn't all good luck. But I certainly, definitely, that story right there was sort of fantastic to me. I would have loved to have seen this myself. I mean, I would have been petrified, but especially the way that, I mean, his face was very interesting when he was trying to sort of, like, he was talking about, like, how the whale-like thing was looking at him with intelligence, like, should I not, sort of thing. It was very interesting. Yeah. So, but whatever it was, I mean, if anybody ever seen our other sea monster like that, a report, I'd like to know about it. I've heard of some with spots on them and different weird things that match some of the stuff, but I don't recall ever one exactly like this. So if somebody ever has seen some other ones, I mean, there's so many carcasses and so many sea monster stories. There's gazillions of them, right? So could be that somebody else has seen this whale too, or this could be like poor old Gigliolio's whale. This guy just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and this whale was a bit wayward off his normal sort of area. But this is what it looked like. To me, it reminds me of some kind of early primitive, like, sort of whale of some sort, right? Very interesting in the sort of hair and the freaky sort of glowing dots. But he said they really glowed like a phosphorescent sort of thing. And it was some kind of weird sort of like the rest of it like steel bluish sort of color, right? So, I mean, very sort of interesting sort of creature, whatever it might have been. Now, here's another one from Old George. I absolutely love this one. This one is fantastic. This is a miniature lake monster lake sort of thing, right? Here in a place called Lake Semetis in Serbia. Here's, according to George, he said, in days of old, there was gangs of magical fairies and a dragon that lived in the lake that had shiny black scales. And he would scream and howl in the night. And then the people would run in, locking their doors. Right? So then, so this is basic idea, but they said that this thing was some kind of like dragon, right? And he would actually, there was these fairies that all lived around in the forest and things like that, but these villagers were so petrified of this thing, and it would come always at night and start to scream and howl and do weird sorts of stuff like that. So these people would sort of, lock their doors. And anybody vanished around or anything like that, immediately it must have been the monster that did it, right? But I mean, I tried to get some other things from him. According to him, this lake was extremely small. He said, yeah, it's like a pond, a small lake, not big. Right? Like, again, this is the way you'd get answers, right? So you could never, it was very difficult to sort of get him to hold down to one sort of thing, right? The sort of idea to get the full best of description from him. But, I mean, the fairies could exist still, possibly. I imagine there's a tree or two. But he had said when that these people, like, he said that was an older story. So even a long time ago, this was sort of, they weren't seemingly seeing it around much, right? So whether or not, like, I mean, this thing's still seen or whatever, and how big really this lake is, I have no idea. I don't even know if I still ever got this correctly from him, the spelling of it, because it was scribbled down, and some of it was on pencil, and I mean, some of it was sort of rubbed out, so I mean, I might not even have this right, but where it's some lake anyways in Serbia, and it's very tiny apparently. And this little dragon guy lives in it, right? So, but I mean, there was that, I told you, and I always do this, sometimes I'll say Japan over China or vice versa. They both have the same dragons and many similar monsters, and even though they're very separate culture, I love both those places, and they both have giant sort of huge ancient fish and all these kinds of things in them. Sometimes by accident I'll say one over the other, just like I do the Yangtze and the Mekong. Both of them have giant monsters in them and sort of things like that. Right? So what once in a while I'll do that of some sort, right? But the thing is that it's very interesting. This sort of it's cute, right? Like, so I don't know if this creature's still being seen or stuff like that. Like, I couldn't even figure out from him if he had ever actually seen the thing or whatever. But he said, yeah, 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 he's there, he's there. But like it's always like that. Like, so it was hard to. But I tried to get like what was the most newest sort of story from him at the time, right? But I mean, these are the weird answers you'd get, right? So I don't really know. But anyways, all I know is somewhere, let's say in the last 100 years, that somebody was seeing some kind of dragon-like monster in there, right? And these cute sort of little fairy ladies flying around and that sort of stuff like that. So I like the idea of it. So it sounds really cute, anyways. And I mean, there was that lake in Japan there where these humongous tortoises that weigh way more than a human being, sort of thing like that, were able to hide in front of families for generations and almost never seen, and most, like 98% of people around there believed them to be a myth and not real, right? And only by fluke in a million one popped their head up in front of a credited person, and then further investigation, and even at that it took them quite a while to finally get one, sort of thing, right? And so this just in a little pond, and even a giant-sized cryptid can hide from you. So I guess the dragon monster could be real, right? So, but anyway, he's out there. So I love the idea that his cute little dragon monster, he's goes out for a drink every night. Maybe he lives in a cave nearby or something like that, and says hello to the little magical being. So sounds like a cute spot. Certainly a lot better than around here with corona masking, and I wish I could hide in a place like that away from sort of the rest of this foolishness, right? But sounds good, but the only problem is I couldn't get off of them what kinds of fish was in it. I don't know, it's small, I doubt much, but the dragon, he must eat something. Right? So this is the kind of always, he'd give you strange sort of answers sometimes, but bottom line is that I like the idea of it there. So if you're ever out in that sort of region there, if somebody could ever track down this lake, and if you happen to see my show and you could send me a picture, I'd love to see it and see how big it really is, and if the dragon monster is still being seen, and what's happening, and how many of the citizens around there drink a lot of Schlitz and stuff like that, right? Because, but all kidding aside, though, I like the idea of these magical sort of beings saying hello to the little dragon monster. Maybe he's roaring because he's looking for a Putin. Maybe he's a Canadian dragon, got lost off course, and he got lost up there, and because there's no poutine, he gets upset in the evening. So who knows? But anyways, it's a cute story. I love the idea of it, a cute little sort of dragon sort of monster there, and he's got the little magical people around. So absolutely fascinating, interesting account. I hear this one, this fantastic about our old buddy here, Megladon, or unknown giant sharks. Zane Grey, now this guy was a really well sort of respected sort of author, and all kinds of adventure, explorer, all that kind of stuff. And he was out on his boat, and his boat was like 30 foot on it, and he saw this huge green yellow shark much larger than his boat. It had a giant square head and huge pectoral fins and white spots. So there's another one of these strange ones with these white spots, sort of stuff like that. And I mean, certainly the rest of the descriptions doesn't remotely match a sort of a whale shark, right? So it sounds like a sort of unidentified sort of one, and the size of it is titanic, right? And plus, nobody would really know what a Megladon in real life would have looked like. We just suspect that he might have looked, you know, like a great white a little bit, or things like that. But I mean, his colors might have been fully different. Nobody would know that, right? But here's some interesting sort of things here. There was a 70-foot humpback whale was near bitten in half, found dead in a beach in 2009. Now, a lot of skeptics said that it was a bunch of sharks that chopped it in half. This is ridiculous. I've seen all kinds of carcasses on beaches myself over the ages. I've also went through massive gazillions of records of accounts of bodies washed up on shore of different sea monsters that they claim was this and that, and right away I knew it was a sturgeon or a moose or whatever it is, right? And that sort of stuff like that. So I always, right away, I am interested in ones where I can't identify them, and we'll cover one up after that's like that, where certainly it wasn't a whale or things like that, but obviously this is certainly a whale, right? But here's the problems, okay? When you'll see whales being attacked by sharks. You'll see all kinds of bite marks all over the place. You'll see ripped chunks and tears and stuff like that. They also, any kind of like flukes, flippers, fins of any sort, any sort of creature that wiggles and jiggles, it moves more. It's more of an attraction to hit than even the other sorts of things. So they'll also nail at these sorts of things like that. Smaller fish species will try and nibble, rip off little chunks of it, and these kinds of things. Yet you notice all these sorts of things aren't touched whatsoever, and most of all, the bloody sort of all these guts here and all these kinds of stuff, all kinds of 5 million fish would have been sort of chomping down and ripping those pieces off. You can clearly see this was sliced right off. I don't think this even was a Megalodon that did this either. Even if it was a Megladon, it could be. But here's the problem. You see on the side, there's a couple of sort of slice marks there, right? That could be the edge of the creature's teeth, that whatever he was biting in, and a few teeth stick out more further, so they sliced into that sort of spot. But the main direct sort of bite chomped them right directly in half. That's possible. Or that these are residual side sharks, a few that sort of chopped in, but the bite gashes look fairly huge, right? So I'm more on the suspect of that's actually because they're pretty close to where the bite mark is. So, but one way or the other, even if they were residual side sharks that did that, they certainly didn't do this part. And they certainly, this stuff wouldn't have been sitting there, all these guts hanging out perfect like that. And the bite mark is, it's like as if somebody chopped it with a giant axe in half, right? Sort of idea like that. So this would be some other kind of more, like what we'll cover after there, about some kind of other sort of sea monster of some sort that would have a giant mouth that would just simply, you know, chop the dude right in half, right? Sort of idea like this. Here's a early sort of a reconstruction of the first Megalodons that was sort of found like this, right? And I mean, at first they used to say they were 80, 90 feet long. Now they shrunk them down to 40-some feet or 50 feet, somewhere in there. I mean, these guys, I suspect this creature got larger than that. But here's some interesting other things. The HMS Challenger found fresh teeth of a Megalodon dated at 10,000 years, and several others. So there's not only one, there's like about 4 or 5 of these things where they all dated 10 to 20,000 years of age. That's nothing in this sort of time thing. The feasibility of them being extinct is actually less than that they're still alive more, because, I mean, that's just around the corner. That's nothing. That's certainly in the realm of man and everything else, right? Sort of thing like that. And the ridiculous assumptions and excuse to poor predator, he wasn't able to find food and he must have died out. All these things are complete imagination and pitch to you that you believe. Right? Here's some other sort of interesting ones here we'll talk about next. This German subboat in the Second World War saw a larger shark than their sub. The Sea of Cortez also has a black demon, been seen numerous times. Looks like a great white, and it's 20 to over 50 feet long, except it's darker black. And then we'll cover this Japanese one that was filmed that is the most conclusive evidence where it's close up, where you can see that, yes, sharks of a Megalodon-like size actually exist, right? So now here's some interesting things. Ages ago, there's some older books you can find that had sort of sightings like this of Titanic-sized sharks of a Megalodon-like thing, and I could have sworn in one of them that this photograph are very similar to one that I saw this before, but a lot of people are claiming that the History Channel had put this fake photo in it. I don't believe this to be actually the case. This photo actually really is older. I'm almost 100% sure a long time ago, 60s, this kind of range. So in an earlier sort of books, there was a photograph like this of some Titanic shark, and they also, I remember in the book, they had mentioned about a submarine seeing this Titanic shark in it. So I just think that History Channel made a sort of an overhyped sort of thing and maybe added some different sort of stuff. Maybe this was even photoshopped a bit. I have no idea. But the thing is that there is a photograph like this, and there is an account that is very similar to this. And there was a shark of this size reported by a submarine in the past. So whether the History Channel goofed around with some stuff or not, that has no relevance on the fact that before the History Channel ever existed or any of these sorts of things, a photograph like this already exists out there that's very similar, right? So I just don't remember if it's this one or not, but this looked, the first time I saw it, it looked very familiar to me, so I'm pretty sure it's the same one anyways, right? I don't remember if this line was in here or not or whatever, but that sort of thing. So that's and here is, you can see science very underestimates, like they'll say big sharks are the favorite ones that they love to blame going up all the rivers, right? As you can clearly see, they can get way bigger. I mean, this one's starting to look in the Jaws sort of range. Look at this. I mean, this thing could easily inhale her, right? So can you imagine you're swimming in the Zambezi or or the Black River in New York or wherever, right? And doo-doo, right? So I mean, there's certainly some Titanic sharks of even known species and all kinds of stuff that are obviously can get way bigger than what typically science will give them, right? Sort of thing like this. Here, this lady found this Megladon tooth just lying right in the ground. I mean, it wasn't even buried, nothing like this yet. All these people want you to believe this is millions of years old. She started clearing off the dirt off of it. You can see the ivory white off of it. I doubt this thing is thousands of years old at the most. And I mean, it's really hard to believe that was sitting for millions of years up on top of a bank, okay, without 5 million rodents and 5 tons of storms and different things that would have occurred from time to time, an earthquake, a tsunami, who knows, like whatever, right? Any kinds of stuff. You would think that this thing would have been buried multi-times over, all kinds of stuff over massive millions of years, right? But instead it's just laying there right like that, and you start scraping it off and it looks like as if the shark just didn't use their sort of Pepsodent for a week or two. So I'm sure these guys with, like I said, a machine that's based on a fake principle of you have geological layers that you imagined that an inch would take 1,000,000 years or whatever, like this sort of thing. You got these different sort of layers, right? And this is how you believe that they must have done. Then you make a machine to program to calculate the layer of the thing and what the object is sort of in the layer and this sort of thing like that, and then this calculates it, right? But that doesn't actually prove that something's millions of years old, right? So, sort of idea like this. And again, if you're going to believe your findings, if you are into this sort of carbon dating and all these sort of things, and you actually believe the Earth is millions of years old, well, then you're going to have to accept their finds that Carchardon and Megladon was around 10,000 years ago. And to a scientist, it's much more believable that they still could be around from 10,000 years ago instead of millions of years ago, right? So keep that in mind. They're just ignoring sort of already stuff out there that's right in front of them, where numerous different ones have dated these early ages, but they're still going to pitch you that they died out millions of years ago, because a lot of these people are still around that wrote these early papers with their imagination after smoking a lot of True Glow, right? And they don't want to, you know, it's politics and you're ruffling feathers feathers and all that sort of stuff. So it just sits there, right? They hope the problem will go away. But nevertheless, definitely the odds of Megalodon had went extinct is extremely low. I mean, this is a big, gigantic sort of predator here. I mean, easily, and these imagination of these guys, the poor creature couldn't find food for an hour, all this stuff is completely the most... All it is a bunch of idiots sitting in a back room, they're smoking lots of True Glow, and whatever your imagination can come up with, and people will believe these things just because the guy has a degree. I mean, it's complete hogwash. There is no basis or facts of any of these things. You couldn't prove any of this stuff. I challenge any of these people to prove this in court. Go walk into a court and prove what you're stating. Dream on, dream on, dream on. Right? So, like, I mean, and this is the thing. So, like, I mean, so people, they always, and then they'll have this stuff. How could the Megalodon have been seen? It's impossible. He died out millions of years ago. Like, who said that it's impossible? And why do you believe that? This is all based on theory, these things, right? And I 100% can guarantee you that a top-of-the-line predator probably is the least likely to sort of die out, because back in ancient times, even people that were netting, most of them didn't net massive way out in the middles of the ocean and things like this. This is a deeper water sort of... This guy hunts bigger prey, right? So sort of thing like that. And they're uncommon. The bigger a creature is, the more likely there's less in numbers, right? And these sorts of things like that. So... And for the creature to reach its maximum size may take ages. Some are very slow, like long-living sort of creatures and all kinds of... a lot of them have no idea, really. Like, they're just guess. There's no real accurate way to 100% identify how old the shark really is, and sort of things like that. So some of them, it's just complete guesses. So it could be that these things could live like way longer than what we think they could, and outsized monsters of many specimens of different species can occur from time to time. But still, if you're a skeptic, this one is definitely the most conclusive sort of evidence where you got it really close up. That cage down there, I checked out the average sort of shark cage is like about 8 feet sort of wide. That's sort of like, and that's sort of like their facial sort of looking out sort of this way, right? 8, 10 feet, some are a bit bigger, whatever, in this sort of range, right? So no matter what, we'll go in a smaller sort of end like this. This Titanic sort of monster here, okay, filmed by this Japanese science group in the Marianas Trench, is the most astonishing size of a predator-like shark I have ever seen. Now, some people are claiming this is a great white. It doesn't look like a great white at all. It actually looks much more like some sort of a sleeper-like sort of shark family, possibly a Greenland sort of sharkish, in this sort of those kinds of ones, more of those sorts, like some kind of ancient-y sort of shark. It could be one of them where it's an unknown sort of form of them, or it's an actual real Megalodon, or a relative of a great white is some sort of different one that we don't know of. But at the beginning of the film here, you see that cage down there. You actually see sharks that are about 8 to 10 feet long, okay, and a group of them. There's 4 or 5 of them swimming around this thing. All of a sudden, King Kong comes. You never see anything scatter so fast in your life. You don't even see them almost on the screen. They blink so quick they're gone, right? Which you can't blame them. So now King Kong comes along, right? So now this thing, look at his pectoral fin here, okay, compared to the sort of width of that cage. That creature's fin is bigger than that cage, okay? And so now... think of that. His gill line here, just his gills, is as easily as wide as this cage. So let's say it was 8 to 10 feet across, right? Okay. Now just lay this cage and now edge it over to his chin. This is right here. You're talking maybe possibly 20 feet before you even reach his pectoral fin. Now, if you saw those sharks at the beginning, I wish I was able to put it in, But if you measured them up, you'd be able to put 3 or 4 of these dudes on this thing's pectoral fin, and they wouldn't even cover it widthwise. Like if they were lengthwise down, like pointing the same way down like the fin is here, and if you laid 3 of them belly to belly, like laying sideways like this, right? 3 of these guys would barely to 4 would cover the width of that creature's fin. Okay, so these are 8 to 10 foot sharks. So there is no way that this dude, he's got to be like incredibly huge, like 60, 70 feet, like, so, you know, maybe even a bit bigger. It's hard to know, but I would never believe any less than 50 some feet here. And even at that, I would be being the most ultra conservative in the universe here, because already here, if this cage is the standards like they claim, right, and from what I can tell from the sharks going by, it seems it would be in this sort of range. So even at that, there's at least 3 cages here would be able to fit at this guy's, maybe even 4, at the tip of his beak, okay? So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly even 4 cages before you barely even make it to his pectoral fin here. So that is absolutely terrifying. So this thing, like right there, would be 24 to 30 feet if it was only 8 feet wide. Okay? And this is just from there to there. Now look at the pectoral fin. Just the fin alone is another sort of, would be the width of the cage. So there's another 8 feet. You see what I mean? Like okay, now you're not even remotely. You still got to go to its pelvic and anal fin, and then a caudal fin and all this sorts of stuff. I mean, the length here could be astonishing, right? So I'd love somebody to fully, like, if the Japanese would verify 100% exactly what the width of that cage was, like from this angle, and then you could sort of then start to get a very close estimate exactly how big that it was. But I would say that's the most astonishing piece of evidence I've ever seen. Besides, there's a helicopter one too, where these helicopter Navy SEAL type of people, somebody like that, like some kind of rescue guys, they went to rescue this lady and this Titanic shark. She looks like she's probably the size of its nose, barely, sort of thing. This Titanic thing comes past and you see it swimming away. It's atrocious. It can't be a great white. It's way, like, this thing is like this thing here. It's like, you know what I mean, monster of size of some sort, right? So, however, it's too blurry and sort of everything to be conclusive. I mean, it could have been some kind of giant basking shark possibly, or some other weird thing, right? But in this case, we clearly know that's not the case, right? And sort of thing like that. And I mean, all people can argue, they can try and claim it's a great white, but I don't believe it is. It doesn't look like a great white to me. But one way or the other, even if it is a relative of one, or is even maybe a great white or any sort of shark, after when they get twice, triple the size of what they're supposed to get, maybe they do become strange looking or darker in deep water. Like, I mean, fish can change color a little bit under certain things, right? You'll get, like, some lakes, largemouth bass will be quite green. Yeah, you know, in other places they call them black bass, right? Because they're quite dark. So, I mean, that's even feasible too. But whatever the case, it looks more like on the sleeper shark sort of family to me, anyways. But one way or the other, I mean, it's not conclusive enough. You'd have to sort of see all its fin structures everywhere, see if there's anything different to conclusively say, is this a different species we're looking at here or not? And this sort of thing. There's more to it. It's not as simple as that, right? But I would find, out of all the sort of ones out there, that is extremely sort of convincing, right? So could you imagine what else is in this Marianas Trench, right? So, I mean, you know, these are the things. There's a lot of sort of mystery creatures out there for sure. And anybody doubts some of these giant shark tails, you could clearly see there's one there. And like I said, because I saw that you see the sharks at the beginning of the film, sadly they're not on here, but go look at them and you'll laugh. Like, you'll see that they look like little toothpicks compared to this thing. Like, I mean, 3 or 4 of them easily, again, could width-wise, if you laid them all in a row, sort of standing up on their tails, right, and put them width-wise across, they would barely fit that sort of creature's fit. So, that is absolutely the most astonishing, sort of terrifying. I mean, could you imagine have been down there and you're stuck there and seeing that thing coming at you? You wouldn't have a hope, but that thing would be able to nail you like a That is the most terrifying sort of creature ever. And that poor guy like that, I feel sorry for him, because I mean, yeah, you know, something like that must be lesser, these sorts, right? And that's why they're rarely seen, and they're mostly a deep water sort of creature, and that's why science hasn't ran across them, right? Sort of thing like that. But with the Marianas Trench now loaded full of empty poutine containers sunk down there, and these kinds of things like this poor guy's not going to have anything to munch down on soon enough. The giant squid and everything else will be gone, right? So, but anyways, so there's your case for the sort of Megladon. There's certainly some fresh teeth that have been found. That girl that found that one on the sort of ground there, I mean, that tooth looks, you know, like it was from last week. So I'm not convinced that that's millions of years old anyway. So, you know, if you want to believe that, you're certainly welcome to it. But all I know is that whether Megalodon's extinct or not, this Megladonish sort of dude isn't, and he's out there. Could you imagine hooking into that dude? That would be the scrap of the century. I would let him go, though. There's no way I would want to kill that thing. I mean, look at him. I mean, but there's no way you'd probably be able to let. Maybe. I don't know. I suppose it'd be feasible. But you'd have to have hell of a good equipment, because, I mean, I can't, like I said, I cannot feasibly in the universe imagine that this creature was under 60 feet. I mean, seriously, I just can't. Because when you see the regular sharks, you can clearly tell they're average size sort of sharks there. And yeah, they probably were 8 to 10 feet long, like they say, sort of idea. And I mean, it all sort of, you add this up and lay this cage across, like, because like I said here, just even to get to his under chin, right, you got like probably 3 cages here just to sort of reach into his pectoral sort of fin area. In width-wise across, if you were to sort of put that like that. So, I mean, that's extraordinary. That's like 20-some feet just in this little spot here. I mean, come on. So, already a great white would be at his maximum that science will believe that they can get, right? So, I mean, you know, you're talking like the most extraordinary creature ever, right? Absolutely love it. Thank goodness they got that on film, because that's a real sort of credible sort of one, right? Here the Kishiumaru sighting. This beast of a giant eel to worm-like monster attacked poor Bernie the whale here in front of the chief officer, and the captain of the Maru watched a whale jump about a quarter of a mile away. And then the next jump, they saw a giant snake-like wormish creature grab the whale. Its color was similar to a pilot fish, was the thickness of a junk mast, had a head 30 feet above the water, stood erect. And that was in 1879 by the steamer from Japan on Cape Satano. So there he is there, and he's grabbing poor Barney the whale there. So very interesting, but I like that account, because I've seen a lot of these where, and different ones from different sort of historians and different mentioning this giant worm monster that will hunt whales. So I believe there actually is some authenticity to it, and I wouldn't be surprised. The one that we had covered there a bit before about the sort of the one I wanted to talk about there, the sort of whale carcass that I showed you bitten in half, right? That sort of thing, something like that, maybe the way they were describing it, maybe would make a better bite like that. So it might have even been one of these things, right? But it's a fascinating sort of early account. And there's also a film you can see this sort of, it looks like a Megladon or some kind of killer like shark. And this lady got this on film, and this whale is up on the surface, and this gigantic thing comes up and nails and bites right into it, right? So, I mean, absolutely fascinating. People have tested it out, and they say it doesn't look to be doctored, right? So, interesting. Like, at first when I saw it, it looks a bit, but it's just because her camera was sort of older or whatever, right? So, but I mean, interesting sort of a film. That's another sort of interesting one you can find out there. I should have covered that one too, but it sure makes you wonder out there. There's certainly some interesting sort of sightings, you know, that are out there that boggles the mind. But certainly this sea serpent here, I mean, he's eating a whale for crying out loud. So, I mean, he's got to be pretty titanic, right? Sort of thing like that. So he certainly couldn't have been a mistaken sort of night crawler or something else that I'm sure a skeptic would say, right? So, here at the Lake Somen, Ukraine, locals fear the beast, even seen over 100 years at least. Some describe it as serpent-like, others a giant catfish-like, some alligators sort of like that sort of thing, right? Monster is blamed on eating livestock and attacking villagers. Creature attacked a groom drunk. So this is several of these that I've collected over the years in different locations where a lake monster or a sea monster attacks a drunken groom. So when you get wasted there, and if you get married, spend it with your wife. Do wife sort of honeymoon-like sort of stuff. Don't wobble off on the beach by yourself or doo-doo like poor old Mr. Spielberg here is in big trouble, it looks like. Sort of thing like that. So, but all kidding aside, it's interesting. There's a lot of these accounts like this, but here's what happened. This groom drunk, he was passed sort of on the beach, right? So locals yelled at it when the creature tried to sniff the groom. So it opened its mouth and was toothless, and the creature moaned and wheezed, right? So probably was lacking its geritol. It might have been a sort of older sort of poor toothless lizard monster, right? So and the thing's described like about 10 to 20 feet long. Apparently hasn't been seen in a few decades or something like that, but there was these sort of accounts here for quite some time. It might be still being seen. Maybe most people don't want to mention that they saw it, right? Because it sounds a bit out there. But, I mean, let's say there was some kind of reality to it, some kind of sort of lizard-like thing. I mean, it could have even been somebody's sort of early pet of some sort, like some kind of monitor lizard that they might have bought in from some circus, or some circus let it loose by million, like any kind of thing like that. It'd be feasible, I suppose, because the description's weird. Like the thing's toothless and it moans and makes strange sounds. It sounds a bit out there. So there, it could have been some kind of weird sort of because not far from these from these regions, it'd be possible some of these other tales of dragon-like things, all kinds of weird stuff from Russia and all these different places, right? It's feasible that there could be a few unknown sort of monitor-like lizards out there of some strange sort that are more sort of unusual, right? But whatever the case, anyways, you know, lucky for Stephen here, lucky for that groom there, he wasn't like old Jaws here. I went to the Universal one there, that was hilarious, where you go down this sort of, this little canal-like thing, and the big Jaws, he comes out there, very entertaining, but I love that movie. It was a great movie. A bit ridiculous, but I mean, you know, not like going down to the pond chasing bluegills or tommycats. Great stuff. But I like when he hooks it on he's got his special line there and the whole deal. So, but very entertaining sort of thing. So certainly a great movie from Mr. Spielberg, and so. But could you imagine that Jaws looks like a pug compared to you know, that creature that we just covered there, Mr. Jaws, down in the Marianas Trench, right? So can you imagine what's really out there, right? Now, here's an interesting one. I had covered before about these native Inuits and all this running across these stellar sea cow-like sort of stuff. This Moa Moa, this interesting cryptid that could be a relic group of stellar sea cows, cousin, was known by the Aborigines and was witnessed by Miss Lovell and 6 others in 1891 on the sandy Cape Fraser Island, Australia, right? And so I'm suspecting that this creature might have also been some of the bunyip reports that you had. Because, I mean, all these things, it's easy for any of these sort of one to then come up a river, right? One of the Australian rivers and sort of stuff like that. But if you look at the depictions of these Inuit and Stellar himself and different ones, right? Look at this one compared to this Moa Moa. I mean, this lady was a fancy sort of lady here, and she's got all her friends, and they're doing their fancy, like, stuff, right? I mean, there's no reason this lady's going to make this up, and this was exactly what she saw, and so I fully believe her 1,000,000,000%. I mean, they knew how to dress back in those days. It was classy, and people told the truth more than sort of lied, right? Sort of thing like that. So in the more higher probability, I would give this, you know, higher class sort of lady here a, you know, a much higher sort of pass that likely she was telling the truth. But I find if you look at the two, they're very, very similar. So either some relative, possibly, like let's say this stellar sea cow was always rare but had little pockets of them laced around, right? So not only a colder sort of version, but a warmer one, because there is accounts out there that are stellar sea cowish like a little bit, that people blamed on elephant seals and stuff, but maybe actually was one of them. So that's one thing, or possibly some unknown long-necked seal species that, you know, or that was similar, right? One way or the other, I wouldn't be surprised if that was also the sort of responsibility of a few of the bunyip sightings that was out there and things like that, of those sorts. But if you look at the two, I just find them very similar. So I know nobody puts that forward, but I just wonder, it's very feasible that, I mean, just like deer, you could have a deer from Russia to Canada, right? And all over the place, right? So it could be feasible that a relative, another little group of them, these funny sea cow-like sort of creatures, you know, because she sees this in this sandy Cape area there, and this sort of like, I mean, everything that's right near the shore, and this sort of the creatures frolicking around, maybe it was eating seaweed too, right? Sort of idea like that. So I mean, very interesting. But I love that. I wanted to put in the original because I thought it was a very cute, sort of a nice drawing. But and just show you here sort of the similarities. I find them very interesting. Now here's an interesting one. New discoveries in 2011 in a Tennessee stream. 2 scientists discovered a new species twice the size of the ones in the region. The scientists got reports of a huge crayfish checked out after a few hours of hard work. They were about to give up, and they started not believing the tales and thinking you know, it must have been these locals must have hallucinated this monster in the urban creek in Tennessee. So after 2 hours, they complained and said that they had worked really hard and they couldn't find anything, and they were just about to give up hope, and all of a sudden one showed up for them, luckily. So there it is. So, but I mean, the thing is I find that hilarious that these guys said after a few hours of work, when I guided for ages, I would spend all day in the river there sometimes because people wanted to night fish for giant drum. I'm the first drum sort of guide probably you could find in human history. Started doing this in the 70s, guiding for a drum, a gar, channel catfish. There's always been catfish guides and stuff like that, but those kinds of species, I mean, it was unheard of people doing that sort of stuff. But I would get these clients who were interested in these sorts of stuff like that, and carp and suckers and weird sorts of things, right? So I'd collect these sort of crayfish in the river and clams and things like that. And I would, for massive hours and hours, be collecting them, enough bait, depending on if you had 3 or 4 of these people out with you or whatever it was, right? and sort of things like that. And we got like monster ones. I released some, like they claim the Canadian record. I forget what it is now. It was like 23, 24 pounds or something per sort of a drum. I released like probably maybe 100, 150, well between 25 and some that have reached up to like pulled little scales a little over 30 pounds, sort of like that, right? So they certainly can get way bigger, but there was no records back in those sort of like in those sort of times. They didn't have like those kinds of things. Nobody was interested in these kinds of species, eh? And these giant sturgeon and things like that, all that kinds of stuff. We just, so in the middle of the night, you'd bring them in, and get them off the line, and away they'd go, right? Sort of thing like that. And but some of them were really titanic sort of monsters, right, and things like that. But the thing is that some species I would rarely see. Like some I would catch all the same kind of similar size, but in some pools on the same river, in just certain little locations, you would find these huge, like rusty crayfish or different kinds of ones that were way bigger, right? And sort of things like this. But I mean, I can't believe that these guys, like a couple hours, and they get these tales about a monster crayfish. They decide to finally investigate it because they got too many calls. So now they finally sort of do this. And then after 2 hours, they're about to give up and say that the person's sort of hallucinating. So I find that sort of like, I mean, so can you imagine the sort of effort that may go on for a lot of sort of scientific expeditions? Like the guy's out there, he's being eaten by bugs. He's not going to sit around waiting for the thylacine all day. He's going to hit the road and write in the paper that, oh yeah, I didn't see one. Right? That's probably what occurs, right? So you have to keep these things in mind, that a lot of people think that there's all kinds of stuff, but like I mentioned there, even to myself, I saw a mysterious crayfish in the same river that I've brought in massive thousands of crayfish, and only ever saw one like this red sort of colored crayfish that couldn't have been any less than like 9-10 inches long, and probably no more than a foot, because it was a giant old mason jar that you'd buy at some kind of one of those bulk sort of places or something where they're bigger, right? And this thing was like, its tail was touching the back of the jar, and I mean, part of its claw was sort of sticking out the side of it. So, like I said, there's no way this thing was like, this jar was under like 10 inches to a foot sort of tall. It couldn't have been any shorter than that. So that's what I'm sort of guessing, that the crayfish must have been in this sort of size. And I mean, he was twice the size of any of the monster ones I've ever seen in the past. I've seen quite a few, like in the 5-inch sort of range or so, or that sort of thing like that, a little bit bigger. But that's about it, right? But this one particular one, and I mean, being in there 5 million times, you would think that if there wasn't any numbers of them, so in my mind, either this guy suffered from gigantism and I saw a fluke in a million sort of thing, or that somehow something got released in there by some weird pet of some sort or something, right? Like any kind of thing like that. I don't know where this thing came from. He looked exactly like a giant sort of crayfish, except he was the size of a small lobster, right? So, but anyways, these things are out there, but it just goes to show you the sort of effort. I thought that was hilarious. They were actually going to give up on their quest, and they'd only worked 2 hours digging around in a stream. Right? You're not going to find undiscovered species that quickly. Like, but I guess in their mind, they think that, oh, all I got to do is I've calculated the monster must live in a pool here. He's going to be underneath that rock. I think we should be able to have this packed up for lunch here and get our alpaghetti and a poutine for lunch, and we'll be all set to go and have a new species described. So pretty funny, but it's just another interesting, just like the other ones. They spent years on the river, and less than 100 yards from their research center, this guy was reeling in all kinds of these green sturgeon, and they were just about to say they were extinct, and this guy caught a pile of them in an afternoon right in front of them. Sort of thing like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that, I mean, it just don't let them discourage you. Even when they're right there, right on the body of water, they can't even find them, right? So, you know, the same thing. I mean, there's all kinds of mysterious creatures out there that are yet to be discovered yet. So don't let the skeptics sort of discourage you in that way, because as you can clearly see, I mean, you know, they didn't discover it. Again, other people reported these things, right? They get these stories about these bigger crayfish, right? So again, science should listen more to sort of these reports and not take them so much for that they're just always by you know, mistaken sort of people, right? Here we'll next talk about the Lusca, or the Rogatumau of Tahiti. This giant octopus from Bahamas often inhabits caves and freshwater blue holes laced through the region. So anywhere in the ocean to sort of in this sort of these back lagoons, all those sorts of spots, right? But especially those big blue holes, right? Locals are terrified to swim in them, and stories of divers to swimmers vanishing these holes abound. There's all kinds of ridiculous stuff. There's some scientists claims that they couldn't survive because of that there's once you get down in the water, there's no oxygen or something like this. But I mean, this is all sort of speculation and things like that, because I saw people actually that have tried to attempt down there, and they actually ran across animals down there, like fish and different sort of stuff. So obviously there must be some oxygen, or they wouldn't be able to sort of breathe in there, right? So that's not completely true. There may be layers, certain areas of it where they can, but that doesn't mean that's where the octopus came through, right? He might have came through a different sort of layer of it, right? So, but whatever the case, anyways, there's a lot of stories from that one, and they certainly don't want to swim those blue holes, so stay away from them. But the St. Augustine carcass found in 1897, although skeptics listed as a whale, the fact is that some of it still was in the Smithsonian. And modern testing was done by Dr. Joseph Gennaro, who found it to be of octopus, yet science ignored that. So the original guy, Baron there, as sort of, here's the original sort of gag here, and you can clearly see right in the center here where the octopus's sort of head like things, and there's stump-like stuff there. You can see it all around and things like that, but the original professor guy, when he looked at it, he didn't have the proper sort of things for that back then. And the thing was already eaten away a little bit, rubbery, sort of looking like it was already starting to decay a little bit. So then he just looked at it and he said it looked a bit more rubbery, like the whale-like sort of stuff, and he just declared it of that instead of saying it was an octopus, right? But the thing is, then since then, modern sort of testing of it, they tested it, and it does clearly state that it should have been an octopus, right? Another one here in Turan, a diver was attacked by a giant octopus by onlookers that saved him and got the beast off him. It was 26 feet long. A ship in Angola was attacked by a giant octopus that near sunk it. One part of his arm got stuck in the mast, and they chopped it off. It was 26 feet long in the 1800s. So guaranteed, I mean, even earliest historians sort of mentioned both. Get a load of this. I find this so ludicrous, right? Okay. The first earliest mention here, sort of you can find of these sort of things, is like thousands of years ago, about over 3,000, right? Sort of thing like that. And the earliest scientists not only described both sort of species of squid, but they also described the giant octopus. And tell you, and the only reason that all of them were discounted until recently, they discovered the two now species of octopus that they already told you existed over 3,000 years ago and described them 100% correctly. But the audacity of these guys, because they didn't believe in it, and the only reason they still won't give them the original credit, is because simply they doubt still the story about the sort of octopus, even though a modern scientist is telling you, yes, a gigantic St. Augustine monster octopus existed, right? So obviously, yes, the species does, just like these early scientists told you that they did. But they didn't believe that there was two species of giant squid or even a species of giant squid until very recent. And then finally these two are proven, right? But the audacity of these guys, and the only reason that both of them now got their claims that they're the discoverer of this ark of toothless ducks and the other species, which is even larger, they got an extra sort of seemingly like this colossus squid on the side there. It's a little bit shaped different at the back end, sort of thing like that, but they suspect them to even get bigger. But both of these guys got all their sort of name in there and all this kinds of stuff, but they didn't discover anything. All these people, every scientist before, and the only reason they discredit their work is because they refuse to accept that they can get over 200 feet, there at least in length, because they only found a few ever examples of pictures of them so far, and ever got one on film or anything like that, right? So almost zero. So these guys actually, like, they spent massive millions of dollars to try and find one, and still never could find one. And a Japanese crew was the first successful to find a live one where they got it actually on film, right? And it's just a little punk one. I mean, it's small compared to these sort of stories out here and stuff like that. Like Pliny de Aristotle described them off of the Maldives Islands in the Second World War. A British war trawler recorded seeing a giant squid longer than their 175-foot ship. I mentioned the very official records. This Navy ship got attacked. It was 130 some feet long or whatever. The scar marks down it to 183. I forget which of the two. I still haven't found the original sort of story of it. But the thing is, one way or the other, we'll go at the low end of 130 some feet, right? Every few inches, there was great big claws dug in it. It was a giant squid, the same kind of claws, the same suction marks and everything. You got 130 some feet, then you have to add extra arms. Not all the arms just grab right on it. The odds of that is very below zero. So you probably have at least an extra third here of length to give extra more arms than the titanic creature's body. So anybody believes that the creature could have been under 150 feet would, yeah, you know what I mean? You're smoking out spaghetti, right? So like, this is Navy stuff where the divers went down there. They found the claws, they found the suction marks all along it. This crazy creature tried to attack it, right? And sort of stuff like that. There was another one, a famous account, 1874, only 4 members survived it, and the giant squid was bigger than their schooner, right? And that one is sort of attacked the famous attack, attacked this ship called the Pearl, right? So ancient historians thousands of years ago were telling you this. Modern sort of things where ships were attacked, and you actually have records of divers going down and even finding very good sort of evidence that yes, it must have been a giant squid that attacked, right? So instead of your fake things saying that they reach 40 some feet long, accept your early things and get rid of these guys that claim that they're the discoverer of the colossal squid and the giant squid, because they're not. These guys, the original sort of people, Pliny the Elder, Aristotle, and many other ones, were the original sort of early scientist guys, right, that describe these, and they describe them correctly. So now you only have to prove the octopus one, and we can't prove that 100% because they refuse to accept the findings, so he's still got to sit on the fence. But at least these two are proven now. And so these guys, again, it was us that just acted like assholes, didn't believe our ancestors, and they 100% told you all exactly the description of them, the size of them, and everything accurate. It's just you haven't seen one this big in modern times, but the evidence is there that clearly, yes, they really can get that big, right? So these guys were telling the truth, and so these people that describe them now don't deserve this at all. It should be originally recorded. the original people that first mentioned this, right? And like I said, there's records over 3,000 years. So whoever can find the earliest first science mention, I'm not sure which one it would be, because there's quite a few early accounts of these, but whichever the earliest one, that's the person that sort of, you know what I mean, needs to be sort of the proper one to giving it to, not these other people. They described it correctly. These guys here are just sort of copycats. They're just marking down information that was already there from original stuff, right? So they discovered nothing, right? All these Newfoundlanders, ancient marine people, have been telling you this for centuries, and sort of you just tended to ignore it because you wanted to live in your sort of a caged little factory world. But the reality is that, again, these people don't make up these things. These historians were telling you the truth, and sort of they said it accurately, right? So just why should they suffer when they were correct and said everything correctly? Because you are a failure in modern times with modern equipment. You can't duplicate what they could back in ancient times, right? so I mean, this is sort of ridiculous. I find that I really hate that people today in modern times take credit for people that did things like thousands of years ago that was already there, right? So, but they want to pretend they did it, just like grenades, to every other sort of thing. The Japanese were using them way before, right? And the Japanese and emperors and Chinese emperors and different ones were using mine bombs, all kinds of stuff, even several thousand years ago. So all kinds of things are out there that were already done way earlier, and I find it a pet peeve of mine that just because modern scientists wanted to be skeptical of it, then finally when one was shoved up their backside, they had to admit it was there, then they describe it and make themselves a hero with a big piece of paper, right? But really all they're doing is copying down information that somebody already knew. Right. So there you have it. Yeah, you know, but anyways, that's why I have sort of like, I see this so much, like, I mean, it's mind-boggling. All these creatures, like half the ones they describe, the ancients sort of already, somebody mentioned this and their sort of stuff, but they just didn't believe in them, right? So these skeptics sure cause a lot of sort of ripping off, of stealing people's sort of proper credit. Because people were skeptical, they caused them to get their sort of the proper credit for them to be removed and given to falsely to people that didn't discover anything, right? Sort of thing. So that's the fact, right? But here's a very interesting dinosaur carcass. In 2006, some pictures were posted on a bunch of different sites. I've seen them on a bunch of, but by a man named Craig and his friend Joan Roach, and he took some photos of it on the Oregon coast. Now, bizarrely, this creature was passed off as a gray whale. His back feet was his penis. So let's look at this for a second. Okay, I find this is an extremely interesting sort of carcass. Okay, this is a gray whale up here. Now, look in the front here. Okay, now look on the, actually, we'll start with the back of the creature first. Okay. You can see in the back of the creature here, okay, there's absolutely no sort of thing there whatsoever like a gray whale would have. So any evidence whatsoever that there was any sort of fin-like structure there, okay? On the top of the creature here, you can see this creature's fin is actually rounded and sort of like that, and very extremely different, completely different than what a whale would have, right? Okay, sort of thing like that. And now here's the interesting thing. Every skeptic pretty well said that this was a whale's penis. So, so it seems a skeptical mind right away, the first thing that they think of when they see anything is a penis. But all kidding aside, this is extremely interesting sort of a sea carcass. I really find this one interesting. Okay. Now, Yes, I can understand why somebody would think this might look a little bit like a whale's penis, but here's the problems, okay? This is on the side of the creature, okay? Now, you can clearly see this, that, okay, the center picture, okay, is the front of the creature where they first took the pictures, facing it this way, okay? This is the back of the creature. Luckily they did this, and this is magnificent that they did, and this clears up a bunch of the stuff. Here's what the issues are. When people seen this on this side, right, the first thing they see is his fin flopped over a little bit, because it's the creature sort of he's laying on his belly, but he's on an angle. Some parts of his body actually buried into the sand. On this behind part, you can see more. You see that bump there at the back end at the bottom picture, okay? You can see there's a stump-like thing. That's exactly in the same area as in the front here of where this leg is coming out. Now, this is clearly the sides of the creature, so obviously it can't be the creature's penis. The creature's penis is buried underneath in this sand on the bottom part, if it does have one, if it was a whale-like relative of some sort. Let's say it did have one. But anyways, the skeptics need to learn that penises don't grow up at your spinal near column up at the top, right? So you can clearly see this. Now, to show you this even better here, okay, we'll go here now onto this. Now, okay, so here you can see, okay, see how the center photograph is at an angle, because the body sunk into the mud. Maybe it was more muddy then. Maybe a storm washed it up and some sand went over parts of it on that side, right? So it's laying on a sort of angle like this. So that's why when they're looking at it, they see this fin and it's sort of bent, because they actually believe this could be a whale's fin, but it's not. You can clearly see, like I showed you on the first one here, at the bottom picture, that it's actually up on its mid-center. It's perfectly rounded. It's actually not, this creature isn't eaten away that much yet. He isn't in that massive decay enough, sort of thing. But here's the things is, okay, now you can see that on the bottom picture here, this is on the opposite side where it's now been pushed into the mud or sand. You can clearly see the top area here where near its tail exactly, there's a stump-like stuff there. So its leg on this side is actually going down. But now in the front here, okay, you can clearly see that on this side, there is no sort of fin-like sort of thing there whatsoever. There's nothing like that. So that's the thing is that it's impossible. It's a gray whale of any sort. They don't have a fin like that whatsoever. The tail, now here, look at this, okay? See how the tail tapers? It's perfect. This thing is not eaten away. These sort of fins off of the side here, okay, would have not been able to perfectly fall off like that and still all leave it round where you don't even, you would see flesh underneath, because the things would peel away and then it would remove and you would see sort of flesh on the sides. You don't see this. This tail is perfectly tapered exactly like a pointed sort of rat-tailed creature, whatever, any kind of animal that would have a pointed rat sort of tail like that, right? Lizards, these different ones. It's perfectly tapered at the end. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no way there was sort of these big sort of fins attached to it, okay? So that didn't fall off. You can clearly see that the leg starts way up past its rib cage, up near on the top of its back here. You can see it's just below its back spine, past the dorsal fin-like thing that it has. Then it sort of goes down a little bit, and you can see where the leg starts. And if you look on the other side, because the creature's pushed into the mud, this is actually way higher up the back on this side, but it doesn't look like that because just he's more sunk on this side, but that's where it actually is. And you can see there's a bump-like depression coming out, clearly indicating that the same thing is matching on that side. So yes, that's probably a leg too that got buried underneath there, right? Now, here's some other interesting sort of things. if you see in the front there, okay, they're claiming again it's a gray whale. See how the thickness is. Now, this creature isn't eating that way much, yet you can clearly see the tapering is perfect all along, and you can actually see little ridges up on the top of the sort of neck of this thing. There's little micro bumps there. So this sort of thing like that on these gray whales here, you can clearly see the thickness is very equal across like that. It doesn't sort of start here and then it would all taper down with this great big long neck. The head is sort of way wider in these sort of whales like this. This creature's head, they didn't see a head on it because either it was buried in the sand or that it got chopped off. Maybe the part is missing here and that's just a part of his head sticking in. But you can clearly see the taper's equal for quite some time there. And you can clearly see this in the bottom picture too. It goes like down, right? So there's no way that that's a whale. Like in multi different ways here. The fin structure doesn't match. The back legs don't match. And there's no front sort of big fins here, right? So again, there's a bunch of piles of problems here. And also a penis doesn't start up at the top of your back. It starts below your sort of a belly here, right? Which is buried in the sand. You can clearly see that on these sort of photographs. On the front and back, you can see that's the creature's stomach. You can see rib cages up towards, you see where the neck starts, near just before the neck starts. If you look at it, some close-ups, if you can find other ones online and stuff like that, and blow it up, you'll actually see the rib line all along this sort of thing like that. So anybody that thinks that that's a penis, you need to reinvestigate sort of the area where it comes out. But anyways, now a lot of people said it was fake fraud and this and that because this guy took this in 1990, right? So then it's 2006 he posted. I mean, the internet wasn't even massively still hopping yet at this point, right? Like, I mean, it's even way 10 million times more crazy. There were still all kinds of people that barely sort of were into computers yet, still even at that point. A lot of certain age groups and things like that. So the thing is, this guy took this in 1990, so he wouldn't have taken it with a digital camera. He would have taken them with normal sort of stuff. So then, of course, now in 2006, he happens to see this site. Oh, yeah, I got those old monster pictures. He decided to sort of get them scanned and then put them up, right? And but then they all started screaming fake fraud, this, that, or it's a whale's penis, or it's a gray whale, right? I mean, you can clearly see this creature isn't rotted away yet. There's the skin color is completely different and stuff. Yes, I know skin rots a little bit and can change color a small amount and different things like that. But to me, this creature actually doesn't look that rotted yet. And that's the thing is that I suspect that probably was its sort of original similar sort of color to that sort of thing like so. But certainly an interesting sort of a cryptid, and definitely it looks very dinosaur-ish, sort of, definitely not like a whale or anything else that I can think of. And certainly that isn't a penis there. So, but anyway, I can see why they would think that. But again, if you look clearly, I mean, seriously, you can see where it starts. It's up near the top of the back of the spine, right? So obviously a penis doesn't grow at the side of your sort of shoulders here, right? where your right or left leg is, right? Sort of thing like that. So, but I mean, absolutely interesting. So, but here, if you still believe that you know, science has all the sort of they find everything. Here's some recent ones here that sort of shows you that certainly large cryptids are out there of all kinds that we just found right now, just some of them here. So although not a full water cryptid, the pygmy elephant loves a bath, right? So in 2008, he was rediscovered here in Borneo, thought extinct for over 200 years, and at least there's thousands of them. So here they've been doing these expeditions for hundreds of years, right, and this sorts of things like that. and they couldn't even find 1,000 elephants that are wider than a Bigfoot. Yeah, they might be shorter than Bigfoot, most of them, but they're certainly at least as wide as a Bigfoot typically, sort of thing like that. And there's 1,000 of them running around at least. So you wouldn't think that they'd be that massively hard to find, sort of thing like that. But there you have it, right? Like even extremely large creatures like that. This one's even better though. This Don Redwood was thought extinct for 65 million years, yet he was found alive drinking water below an UV province there, right? So he's another water cryptid. So this guy wasn't even hiding from us. So according to the news statistics, we're 25 million years old. So it took us 25 million years. So probably even the first million, we must have learned just barely how to toot and open up our mouth and burp and stuff like that. And then 24 million years after learning to drink the first beer 24 million years ago, we had one beer per year. And after a Canadian 2-4, we finally reached up to the 25 million year. And now we've just finally discovered this tree. So it takes us 25 million years here to finally discover this tree. So I mean, we've only been hunting for Bigfoot here seriously for not even 100 years yet, barely. Not even that, sort of thing like that. And so I mean, we may have quite a few million left to go because it took us 25 million just to find a standing tree. But all kidding aside, though, here's some other interesting one. O'Mara's whale there recently discovered. Even mariners and stuff didn't recognize it in things like that. But yet this dude's like 40 feet long. He breathes air, so I mean, and he's got to go through sort of, you know, according to everybody, there's 5 million ships out there. We surely should know about it, right? We're the great science, right? Obviously, right? Again, these sort of things, they only just run across these things by luck most of the time. And 98% of the ones that were ever discovered, they were told by natives that told them the story about it, and that's how they found them, right? They didn't actually really find them themselves, and the natives already knew about them, right? So, I mean, this stuff is just, you know, again, I hear this new species orangutan described in Sumatra 2017. I mean, he's not much shorter than Bigfoot, right? So, I mean, and he wasn't even trying to hide from us. He's just hanging out there, right? So, sort of thing like that. So the World Wildlife Fund there, a group discovered him, the Tapanuli, right? So, I mean, here they denied that ever it's impossible that the orang pendek lives, or there couldn't be any creature on there. You know, I'm fully dubious. We've been there before, right? Like sort of stuff like this. This is the answer we've been listening to for years from every skeptic in the planet. Yet here, right here, just a few years ago, you know what I mean, a great big sort of new discovered ape species, right? So these are the things, right, and sort of stuff like that. So if you're still skeptical, like I showed you here, real sea serpents have landed on our shores in the past, such as this beast that was not a whale, a seal, any known species on Earth. So, you know, so there you have it, right? So, like, I mean, like I said, these creatures, all kinds of things are discovered. Some years even over 10,000, even though a lot of them are insects and things like that. Point is there's some big dudes mixed in with it, so people are way too skeptical of these things, and there's all kinds of sorts of mystery creatures out there. And I challenge any skeptic in the world. You can claim all you want, a whale, a moose, or whatever. You're smoking the loco. Right? This was a real living dinosaur-like sort of fish species of some sort. I'm not going to speculate exactly which one, because I mean, I believe that a lot of these scientists are wrong in their descriptions of these early fossils. A lot of them they didn't find. They don't even know whether it really breathed there or not, or different things like that. And some of this stuff is presumption. Even if they got a decent fossil, there's parts missing where they're just making presumptions about it. So as far as I know, it could be any one of these ones that we've already found. sort of like that Mosasaurian, all these kinds of ones, like these sorts of things, right? But whatever he was definitely a fish, and he had dragon scales on him, titanic teeth, eyeballs bigger than your head. Roughly, right? You can see the eyeball compared to this guy here and this sort of stuff like that. So this certainly creature existed. He wasn't a whale. The fins way in the back. Whales have them in the front. Whales don't have breathing gills on the side. This creature wasn't even eaten away barely. He's still, his eye was even fully intact, right? So, I mean, there's a real sea serpent right in front of you. So certainly at least that one existed in the 1800s, right? and sadly, urban monsters, here's a pile. This was done on a miniature piece of artwork. But here's just some of the sort of creatures that's been reported in sort of the waterways around my region, right? Everything from prophylactic beasts to giant eels and mahogany sea serpents and mermaids and sort of walking fish and deviled horn monster pike and all kinds of stuff. So it's a rough fishing in these sort of bodies of water, and these poor creatures aren't going to be lasting much longer if we continue throwing in all these kinds of garbage here. As you can see, these garbage creatures already mutating into these prophylactic beasts and everything else, right? So our bodies of water are worldwide. We're not going to see these monsters much longer, right? So this is the thing. So I mean, you can be skeptical all you want, and I know we have a little bit of fun, tease the scientist guy and this sort of stuff like that, but it's just I'm not a fan of the pompousness of that. Some guy, you have to think in a logical way if you're a scientist here and really think about this. Just analyze this one sort of thing. You're only skeptical because you're just being skeptical. You actually don't have any basis to say any of these things don't actually exist, right? And when you ignore history and you see that so many thousands of species that you've now described that already people told you about in the past that already described them, and you see they were 100% telling you the truth, you can see that there's way more probability a lot of times that when, even if they sound crazy, these stories, that there may be some things to them, and that you really, there's lots of things new to learn all the time and stuff like that. So instead of being closed-minded, like I said with the rare weasel that was here in the region and these kinds of things, right? I mean, calling these people and begging and pleading them to come, they wouldn't come even look. Oh, no, kid, it must be a mole, right? Sort of stuff. So this mentality needs to change, because there's real serious sightings out there mixed in amongst these sorts of stuff where these animals could be dead because you didn't want to even go look, or you didn't want to protect, or things like that, because you're dubious, right? But aren't you going to feel bad later if some kind of, there really was a 100-foot-long mahogany sea serpent, and he was some ancient prehistoric survivor and all that sort of stuff, right? Wouldn't you feel bad if you sort of, now you see this sort of wonderful creature and you could have protected him in some kind of bay and closed it off and not allow people to throw garbage in it and sort of thing like that? So, I mean, just even the most skeptical of people, there's been skeptics for ages, and every year the skeptics, ones that they said something didn't exist, now it's proven it does, right? So, you know, don't let them discourage you. But the thing is, if we continue throwing in pollutants in our waters like this, these poor creatures, look what they got to put up with here, these garbage cans and people throwing in their crack needles to restaurants because they don't want to pay for taxes, sneaking out at night, these mystery cryptid restaurateurs that throw their garbage into our water systems, and all kinds of characters are out there throwing in masks and stuff. What I was talking about before, exactly what I said, and here it's already reality. I just read, I forgot to mention that on a previous show. I mentioned, how do you know what happens with these masks and the thing? They're saying that these things actually can go through the water, and they're concerned about it. It's landing in piles of sort of drinking water supplies and things like that. and nobody really knows. They know that yes, it could possibly survive down there, but they're not sure how long and all this kinds of stuff, right? So how do you know that these things aren't going to start going in and sort of mutate and maybe become some new thing, get inside the fish or whatever, right? So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that. There's all kinds of people making money with these masks and all kinds of terrible sort of stuff in our world. Soon we won't be able to go to restaurants anymore. Apparently, if you don't want to get these shots and stuff like that, and people have been fear tacticked into getting something that may be sort of causing huge calamities very soon in the future, right? So, but these are the things we allow sort of crooked sort of billionaires to run us, and poisons and throwing poisons in our waters and all this kinds of stuff. There's going to be no more sea monsters soon, right? So please, like, let's start having some common sense here again. And let's hopefully we can bypass this corona stuff. Stop throwing your masks in the water and these different things and all this stuff, or God knows what will happen next, right? So anyways, hopefully the good thing is there's still a lot of clean waters out there and things like that for people that are protecting them. So all we got to do is start changing and quickly, and then start taking care of our waters, and our lake monsters will still be here, and we'll still have something to talk about them. so anyways, stay tuned. I'm not sure which one we'll do next time, but we'll continue on with another show. And don't mean to down you out and that sort of things like that, but these are serious things, and we need to talk about them, and before they're too late, right? And sort of things like that, because some of these creatures, like in this canal systems and things like that, haven't been seen in years, because some of this fish species now may be extinct in there. The only good thing is they can all get back in through other water systems that connected, so that's a good thing, but the habitat for them won't allow them to sort of stay long, right? And certainly us to keep throwing garbage in there isn't going to help it any. So anyways, keep our waters clean for sure. So have a great day, and if you have any sort of sightings and stuff like that, please contact. Doesn't matter, it could be a glowing moose to Sasquatch with 14 heads. I want to hear it. So anyways, thanks for watching. I know we, like I said, some of the controversial subjects we carry and different things like that, but we try and give you sort of some interesting information out there, that there's certainly a lot of things out there that are mysterious, and that our world isn't as simple as everybody wants to make it. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.